Hi, this is Mrs. Cruz with our daily task videos, and in this video we're going to be looking at Tuesday, May 12th's task. So that task is to read pages 11 to 20 of chapters 5. Well, I think we're still on chapter 5, moving on to 6 very shortly, and we'll be answering text-dependent question number 2. So looking at our notes from yesterday, we know that text-dependent question number 2 is, what does Big Mom force Cassie to do? And why does she do this? And that's like chapter 5. Remembering what we read yesterday, we know that right now Big Mom took Cassie, TJ, and Stacy over to Strawberry. They're there because they're going to sell at a market, but at the same time, after they're done, TJ convinces Stacy and Cassie to go to a store without Big Mom, because Big Mom went to go talk to Mr. Jameson. So you should be reminding yourself what happened so far at the store. And we know that it seems like it's going to be a big deal. Why? Because we left yesterday's reading with Cassie saying that she's going to say something to Mr. I'm forgetting his name. Let's go to that part right now. So here's a section where she said, I decided to remind him without saying anything to Stacy. I turned around and marched over to Mr. Barnett. So you should be asking yourself, why is she trying to talk to Mr. Barnett? And we know that it all comes down to TJ trying to order something, and we know that his order wasn't really being taken care of. At first, Mr. Barnett helps another lady out. Then when he's finally about to do it, he gets distracted by his wife, who asks him to help her fill a different order. And that was kind of like the cherry on top when Cassie realizes that the person that he's helping is just a kid, a white kid, but some kid no bigger than she was. So that's what kind of gets her upset. So she feels like she's going to go talk to him, and maybe he forgot about them, is what she's thinking. Okay, so as you guys saw, our goal is to stop at page 20, so let's mark page 20. Here's Yan. So I'm going to mark it here. Okay, then let's get ready for the reading. Remember that we're asking ourselves, what is Big Mom forcing her to do and why? Okay, here we are. So I'm going to take this one out. I will say, prepare yourself. This is my probably least favorite part of the book. It's very interesting, but at the same time, it's the type of scene that it's going to get you very frustrated. So let's get started. Excuse me, Miss Barnett, I said as politely as I could, waiting a moment for him to look up from his wrapping. I think you forgot, but you was waiting on us before you was waiting on this girl here, and we've been waiting a good while now for you to get back. The girl gazed at me strangely, but Mr. Barnett did not look up. I assumed that he had not heard me. I was near the end of the counter, so I merely went to the other side of it and tugged on his shirt sleeve to get his attention. He recoiled as if I had struck him. You was helping us? I said, backing to the front of the counter again. Well, you just get your little black self back over there and wait some more, he said in a low, tight voice. I was hot. I had been as nice as I could be to him, and here he was talking like this. We've been waiting on you for near an hour, I hissed, while you round here waiting on everybody else, and it ain't fair. You got no right. Whose little nigger is this? Bellowed Mr. Barnett. Everyone in the store turned and stared at me. I ain't nobody's little nigger, I screamed, angry and humiliated. And you ought not to be waiting on everybody before you wait on us. Hush up, child, hush up, someone whispered behind me. I looked around. A woman who had occupied the wagon next to ours at the market looked down upon me. Mr. Barnett, his face red and eyes bulging, immediately pounced on her. This gal yourn, Hazel? No, sir, answered the woman meekly, stepping hastily away to show she had nothing to do with me. As I watched her turn her back on me, Stacy emerged and took my hand. Come on, Cassie, let's get out of here. Stacy, I exclaimed, relieved to see him by my side. Tell him. You know he ain't fair making us wait. She your sister, boy? Mr. Barnett spat across the counter. Stacy bit his lower lip and gazed into Mr. Barnett's eyes. Yes, sir. Then you get her out of here, he said with hateful force, and make sure she don't come back to your mammy teacher what she is. I already know what I am, I retaliated, but I bet you don't know what you are, and I could tell sure you too, you old... Stacy jerked me forward, crushing my hand in the effort, and whispered angrily, "Shut up, Cassie." His dark eyes flashed malevolently as he pushed me in front of him through the crowd. As soon as we were outside, I whipped my hand from his. "What's the matter with you? You know he was wrong." Stacy swallowed to flush his anger, then said gruffly, "I know it and you know it, but he don't know it, and that's where the trouble is. Now come on, before you get us into a real mess. I'm going up to Mr. Jameson's to see what's keeping Big Ma." "What about TJ?" I called as he stepped into the street. Stacy laughed wryly. "Don't worry about TJ. He knows exactly how to act." He crossed the street suddenly, then his hands jammed in his pockets. I watched him go, but did not follow. Instead, I ambled along the sidewalk, trying to understand why Mr. Barnett had acted the way he had. More than once, I stopped and gazed over my shoulder at the mercantile. I had good mind to go back and find out what made Mr. Barnett so mad. I actually turned once and headed toward the store. Then, remembering what Mr. Barnett had said about my returning, I swung back around, kicking at the sidewalk. My head bowed. Okay, so this is kind of like a good comprehension check. You should be wondering, like, a few things really. Like, either why does Mr. Barnett get so upset? So, like, that could be a question. You can even ask, like, why doesn't Cassie understand he's upset? So any of those questions would be interesting to ask. Okay, but for now, let's keep going. I'm just adding these spaces here on the right since they weren't added already. Okay. We can even add the fact that Stacy's so upset. He can ask, why is Stacy so upset? Even asking, like, who is he upset at? Okay, let's keep going. We know that she's waiting now for Stacy. It was then that I bumped into Lillian Jean Sims. "Why don't you look where you're going?" she asked huffily. Jeremy and her two younger brothers were with her. "Hey, Cassie," said Jeremy. "Hey, Jeremy," I said solemnly, keeping my eyes on Lillian Jean. "Well, apologize," she ordered. "What?" "You bumped into me. Now you apologize." I did not feel like messing with Lillian Jean. I had other things on my mind. "Okay," I said, starting past. "I'm sorry." Lillian Jean sidestepped in front of me. "That ain't enough. Get down in the road." I looked up at her. "You crazy? You can't watch where you're going. Get in the road. Maybe that way you won't be bumping into decent white folk with your nasty self." This second insult of the day was almost more than I could bear. Only the thought of Big Ma in Mr. Jameson's office saved Lillian Jean's lip. "I ain't nasty," I said, properly holding my temper in check. "And if you're so afraid of getting bumped, walk down there yourself." I started past her again, and again she got in my way. "Ah, let her pass, Lillian Jean," said Jeremy. "She ain't done nothing to you." "She done something to me just standing in front of me." With that, she reached for my arm and attempted to push me off the sidewalk. I braced myself and swept my arm backward, out of Lillian Jean's reach, but someone caught it from behind, painfully twisting it, and shoved me off the sidewalk into the road. I landed bottom first on the ground. Mr. Sims glared down at me. "When my gal Lillian Jean says for you to get yourself off the sidewalk, you get. You hear?" Behind him were his sons, R.W. and Melvin. People from the store began to ring the Simses. "Ain't that the same little nigger that was cutting up back there at Jim Lee's?" someone asked. "Yeah, she the one," answered Mr. Sims. "You hear me talking to you, gal? You apologize to Miss Lillian Jean this minute." I stared up at Mr. Sims, frightened. Jeremy appeared frightened too. I apologized already. Jeremy seemed relieved that I had spoken. "She did, Pa, right now, before y'all come, she did." Mr. Sims turned an angry gaze upon his son, and Jeremy faltered, looked at me, and hung his head. Then Mr. Sims jumped into the street. I moved away from him, trying to get up. He was a mean-looking man, red in the face and bearded. I was afraid he was going to hit me before I could get to my feet, but he didn't. I scrambled up and ran blindly for the wagon. Someone grabbed me, and I fought wildly, attempting to pull loose. "Stop, Cassie," Big Ma said. "Stop, it's me. We're going home now." "Not 'fore she apologizes to my gal, y'all ain't," said Mr. Sims. Big Ma gazed down at me, fear in her eyes, then back at the growing crowd. "She's just a child." "Tell her, Auntie." Big Ma looked at me again, her voice cracking as she spoke. Go on, child. Apologize." "But, Big Ma," her voice hardened. "Do like I say." I swallowed hard. "Go on." "I'm sorry," I mumbled. "I'm sorry, Miss Lillian Jean," demanded Mr. Sims. "Big Ma," I bawled. "Say it, child." A painful tear slid down my cheek and my lips trembled. "I'm sorry, Miss Lillian Jean." When the words had been spoken, I turned and fled, crying into the back of the wagon. No day in all my life had ever been as cruel as this one. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 5, which really goes back to our question, what does Big Mom make Cassie do and why? So I think here's our answer, right? So what does she make her do? She makes her apologize, right? So we're going to highlight all of our evidence. Okay, so I'm going to highlight here. She looks at her voice is cracking, and she says, "Go on, child, apologize." Now, part of the question is asking us why. I'm going to actually apologize this too. She's telling her to say it. So a big part of it is why. So I think we kind of can see here that it says, Big Ma gazed down at me, fear in her eyes, then back at the growing crowd. She's just a child. So I think this kind of tells us why, right? Big Ma's afraid that if they don't do it, then maybe, like, since the crowd is growing, that usually tells you, like, as the crowd's growing, it's becoming a bigger and bigger deal. So it tells us that maybe she just wants to get rid of the problem before it grows even more. Okay. So since we're going to keep reading for now, and then we'll come back to answer text appending question number 2. But now you guys can see why we said this chapter is pretty intense. Okay. Chapter 6. The ride home was long and silent. None of us felt like talking. Not even TJ. Big Ma had informed him shortly after leaving Strawberry that she did not want to hear another word out of him before we reached home. He sulked for a while with a few audible grumbles, which no one paid any attention to. But finally he fell asleep and did not awaken until we had driven up the Ranger Road and stopped in front of the Avery house. By the time Jack pulled into our own yard, the night was a thick blackness and smelled of a coming rain. Big Ma climbed warily down from the wagon and went into the house without a word. I stayed with Stacy to help him put the wagon inside the barn and unhitch and feed Jack. While I held the flashlight on the barn doors, Stacy slowly slid aside of the plank of wood that held the doors fastened. "Cassie," he said in a quiet, thoughtful voice, "don't go blaming Big Ma for what she done." "Why not?" I asked angrily. "She made me apologize to that old ugly Lillian Jean about something that wasn't even my fault. She took them old Sims aside without even hearing mine." "Well, maybe she couldn't help it, Cassie. Maybe she had to do it." "Had to do it?" I practically screamed. "She didn't have to do nothing. She's grown just like Mr. Sims, and she should have stood up for me. I wouldn't have done her that way." Stacy put the plank on the ground and leaned against the barn. "There's things you don't understand, Cassie." "And I suppose you do, huh? Ever since you went down into Louisiana to get Papa last summer, you think you know so doggone much. I betcha I know one thing. If that had been Papa, he wouldn't have made me apologize. He would have listened to me." Okay, let's pause there for this part 1. So Stacy tells him there's things that you don't understand. So I'm just gonna pause it with my question here. So what does